Patrick's grandfather Antonio was a very wealthy man. He made a fortune establishing a chain of movie theaters across America. He grew from a small businessman to a multimillionaire. He is a prime example of a self-made man who went from rags to riches. His grandpa used to say, "Money doesn't grow on trees." It was one of his favorite sayings. He taught his children and his grandchildren the true value of money, rising from hard work. He earned all his millions without winning a lottery or getting inherits from a lost uncle. He knew from his own experience what it is live from paycheck to paycheck, or to be so broke that you cannot even afford bus fare. He was a reasonable spender and never threw money down the drain. He preferred to make investments. So Patrick is very proud of his dad because he got rich by doing what he loved. He worked as a at the same time, he was a generous philanthropist. He donated a considerable amount of money to build schools in poorest districts. He established a charity fund providing grants and scholarship for students from poor backgrounds. And he often said that money spent on education is never wasted. He also made donations for business programs. His grandfather Antonio came to the U.S. 60 years ago from Salvador, a small country in Central America. He was as poor as a mouse, as a church mouse, and he borrowed money from his family, and they lent him as much as they could to pay his trip to USA. So he lived on a stock string, and because the cost of living in the USA was greater than in his home country. He worked as a dishwasher, as a fast food cook, as a porter, as a shop assistant, and he swept the floor in the store. And at the night, he worked as a security at a nightclub. So Antonio, after some time, Antonio started saving money. And around that time, he met his wife, Patrick's grandmother, and he wanted to be closer to her, and he wanted to see her more often, and she found a job in her local movie theater. So he fell in love with cinema, and grandma fell in love with him. He bought an incredible expensive diamond ring that cost him an arm and a leg, and proposed to her. They soon got married. Eventually, Antonia was promoted to a cinema manager, and in a few years was running the entire theater. They now they could afford to buy a car and a bigger apartment. He started to investigate in stocks, and one day he wanted to open his own business. It was a movie theater, but at first time it failed, and he went bankrupt. But instead of beating himself, grandfather did his best to learn his mistakes. He came up with a proper business plan and started looking for a sponsorship. She managed to find a few investors and raise enough capital to open another movie theater. Things were going well. So he had 16 locations around 34 states. On his 80th birthday, Grandpa decided to retire and go on a trip around the world. He said he had achieved everything he ever dreamed of. A couple years later, he died, and the family inherited his business. Now it's Patrick's turn to take the lead.